So my presentation today is called Vaping from the Edge, a deeper look at the vaping phenomenon. And what I'd like to do this afternoon is try and paint a bit of a picture of what's going on with the vaping cultural community, which I think is extremely important in this industry. Oh, there we go. So, right, my website, ECF, e-cigarette forum, it's the world's oldest and largest vaping community. If you wanted to find anything about electronic cigarettes or vaping, which didn't even exist as a term back in 2007, that's where you went. Right now, we're getting about 3 million visits a month. We estimate this year in the United States, we'll see about 8 million people visiting ECF this year. A huge traffic increase over the last year of 80%. It's the biggest jump we've ever seen. Okay, so this is what I'm going to talk about today. First, what is vaping? I'm going to talk about the people involved in vaping, the community, as it were. The language that's used, because I think that's an interesting signifier of a separate cultural community. The venues that this community is present at, and the products. And I'm going to pull out a little bit of research that we do annually from our April survey. We do a big survey. This year we had a little over 10,000 responses online. Okay, so what is vaping? Well, vaping is a term coined to describe, really, I think, the second and third generation devices within the sort of overall e-cigarette space. I put this slide up because I'm led to believe that this is the first use of the word vaping from December 2007. It's a week after I'd set up ECF. That's my alter ego, Smokey Joe. Now, this is a sort of proxy measure of the impact of vaping, if we take it as a proxy for the second and third generation devices, which I think is reasonable to do. What you see in the top there is electronic cigarette as a search term on Google. And what you see at the bottom there is vaping as a search term on Google. And what you can see right at the end is that vaping has overtaken electronic cigarette as a search term. The other variations are somewhat similar, e-cigarette and so forth. So this to me is a historic photo, and it kind of signifies very much about vaping as a cultural phenomenon. This is the world's very first modified device. It was called the screwdriver, and this is the photograph that he put up in December 2008, shortly before he went on to sort of commercially produce it and sell it via our website. And this concept of modding devices for commercial markets was really introduced. Many others have followed since. And his device, the screwdriver, was copied within about 6 months by the Chinese and sold as the slightly less catchily named DSE 905. So the people, who are they? Well, according to Mike Dope, they're a bizarre online cult, which is more than unfair and also completely inaccurate. I mean, they're not a bizarre online cult. They are normal smokers who, in the main, initially want either to give up smoking or to find something cheaper or to have convenience in their smoking with respect to public place bans and so forth. And this sentence here kind of represents how the cultural community online in particular interacts. A friend recommended me to those disposable brand, and I completely regret buying them. I'm looking for a new vape. Please have patience with me and explain things thoroughly. And this person here received 39 replies, recommendations. Okay, so this is an online forum, but of course this is the same conversation that's happening within this cultural community at vape stores and all sorts of places. More about the people. We have genuine, bona fide vaping celebrities, believe it or not. This chap, Nick Green, one of his videos there, 439,000 views on YouTube. When he goes to the various conventions, he's treated like a celebrity hero. Same with Phil Basado. And in the UK, we have another guy who gets significant traffic called Scott Bonner. And you can't read that, but But here's something interesting. It's this appeal to honesty and credibility, which is absolutely central with these guys. This review reflects my honest, true, and accurate opinion of the product. These guys absolutely live or die by their credibility, their unbiased opinion that it's all about the product and it's not about being paid off. And I put this slide a little early because I want to go through some more survey data later, but this one here as well sort of is a useful proxy for describing the fact that vapers, people who sort of self-identify as vapers, are also non-smokers. They have completely transitioned away from smoking tobacco. And I say this as a proxy because we do have other data that back this up, but if you look through here, you see the breakdown, and as you move through the devices to the mid-size and the large APVs and the mechanical mods, you see people smoking less and less and less, and this is exactly the same trajectory that most vapers take on the way to becoming a vapor. So the venues, where does this cultural community exist? Where does it take place? Where are these ideas transmitted and spread and understood? Well, so you have my website, which is big. As I said, 8 million people will be there on that site from America alone in the next 12 months. But in aggregate, we're tiny because there are thousands of Facebook groups, Instagram, Twitter. That's Reddit there. That has 56,000 readers. And again, the totality of this community is much bigger than looking at any one of its constituent parts, because in addition what you have is this community being spread around globally in its particular domain, high street domain, which is the vape stores. So there's a little bit of data on vape stores which I've gleaned from actually people present in this room. All of them. So in the United States, we have 14,000, which is a phenomenal growth. And a year ago, I believe there were approximately 5,000. That's from Ron Tully of Zapata. In France, 5,000. In the UK, around 800. So we had huge growth. Many of these are founded by vapers themselves, the early adopters who got into it 2 or 3 years ago. And every single one of them serves as a sort of local hub of the vape culture. There's a bit of comparative data from our survey, which shows again, it's a sort of proxy measure, but what we see there is in a vape store for the initial introductory purchase has gone from 8.8% last year to 34.12% this year. So I think that shows a huge growth. And another thing that's happening in the community, and this is where the industry and the community really intersect, these vape shows, conferences, and meets. So I've just returned from the Vape Summit in Las Vegas, where they had 10,000 people attended, industry and vapers as well. They literally took over almost the entire Hard Rock Hotel. And this is a tour. They have 3 more planned this year. And this is just one particular group of people. There are many others as well. There were over 250 individual businesses represented there. And they had a $100,000 vape poker tournament. And bringing it back to France, we had the Vape Expo earlier this year. A smaller affair, but hugely well run, very, very professional, and really demonstrating a commitment to the future of this particular segment. Now, I'm not going to bombard you with terminology, but one of the things that emerged over the last 6 or 7 years is a real vernacular that's used by the cultural community, both to describe the actual usage of the products, the product elements, the sensory aspects, and other cultural things like etiquette and so on and so forth. I just flagged that up because I think if you're going to consider a cultural movement, you have to consider that any cultural movement worth its source is going to have this kind of in-crowd vernacular developing, and you certainly see that with vaping. Okay, so onto the products, and this is where I'll bring out some of our survey data for you. So vapers almost universally use second and third generation devices, and many more people are using mech mods, which don't really neatly fit into either category. That's the big growth that we've seen in the last year. But again, talking of that big change over the last year, we've seen this ever since the dawn of vaping. The product popularity ebbs and flows, changes, and there are numerous drivers for this, not just fashions and trends, but there's also a question of price and availability as well. There are big supply chain issues with some of the products. Some of the products that become very popular very quickly are built by small, almost artisanal makers who can't cope with the demand. So there's some sort of interesting dynamics there. And as I said before, the biggest trend in the last year is the rise of the mech mod. And I'll explain what that means. So in the e-cigarette landscape, we have, the ECF device, not e-cigarette, specifically what's being used by our visitors. 34.78% are using the mid-sized type devices, the egos and so forth. 32% are using the larger devices with advanced microelectronics, so voltage regulation and so on and so forth. And 26.41% are using mechanical mods, which are very simple devices. They're just, the battery connects through to the atomizer, but the thing that differentiates the mechanical mods is typically the level of craftsmanship behind. Some of these things are made by extremely skilled metal workers in small workshops. Some of them may be relatively big companies. Svomesto in Germany, for instance, is becoming a huge leader in developing these incredibly high quality, but actually mechanically very straightforward devices. And they sell for phenomenal amounts of money. I mean, some of the more desirable devices regularly reach $1,000 or so. So something's gone wrong with the slide there, but this is the atomizer landscape. So when considering vaping products, you can't just think about the battery component and the atomizer as a single unit. People are highly preferential in the way they choose their combinations, including the flavors too. So with our speaking of the atomizers, with our sample, the disposable devices have fallen off a cliff. Nobody's using them anymore. The pre-fill carts, which 1 year ago were a big deal still. So this was, sorry, the pre-fill carts have fallen off a cliff, but the refill carts 1 year ago were 29.87% usage, and they've dropped down now to 10.25. So this was people buying the first generation cartomizers and actually refilling it themselves, and that was a very popular thing to do. But in terms of the overall market now, it's shrunk to 10.25%. Tanks in total have gone from 65.69% last year, which was big, to 86%, whether that's generation 1, 2, or the rebuildable tanks, where people are literally building the coils and screwing them into place to fine-tune the level of performance that their device has. Okay, so flavors. There's the breakdown with our sample. So 30.55% of people are using fruit, 22.3% are using tobacco flavors, 18%, 19% almost bakery and dessert flavors, 6.5% menthol. But bear in mind with menthol, quite a few people are using tobacco menthol as well, which would be in that first category. And here's an interesting trend that we picked up. Only 15% of customers who purchase their e-liquid in a bricks and mortar vape store use tobacco as their main flavor. So our sort of theory is that tobacco flavors just aren't very good, and/or tobacco flavors aren't really what it turns out people want, despite perhaps going in thinking that the assumption being that you want to just transition straight from like to like. I don't think that's true, and I think the fact that people are going into the store where they can try out different flavors and different models, rather than walking out with a tobacco type flavor, they're walking out with fruits or whatever the other breakdown was that we just saw. And in terms of actually making the full transition, it can't be underestimated. You know, this to me is something that I was really happy to get the data back on when we did our survey, because we see it again and again. People saying outright, look, the thing that finally got me to stop smoking was the variability of flavors. I tried, you know, however many flavors, and eventually I found this one that just made me think, oh, why would I smoke tobacco anymore? And 65% in total consider flavors other than tobacco to have been important or very important in helping them quit tobacco smoking. And with females, it's 71%, and tobacco as the most used flavor is about 10%. So e-liquid consumption, how much of the liquid itself are people consuming? Well, the average sits at around you know, the 5 to 6 mark. Which, when you consider that in terms of the disposable devices, which typically contain about 0.8 milliliters or up to 1 milliliter, they'd have to be consuming 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 cartridges a day in order to be getting that much. So you can see why the tank systems make so much sense. And this, again, you know, you have to remember about our sample. Our sample had 90% completely ceased tobacco smoking. So this seems to be what's needed, this level of consumption, in order to become completely tobacco-free. Okay, and this is kind of my concluding statement, because obviously, you know, everybody who vapes knows that we're in a time of extreme regulatory uncertainty, and actually it is, of course, the regulatory uncertainty, or whatever's going to happen with the regulations, that is going to decide the future of this cultural community. Now, there's a little bit of kind of, you know, positive self-responding going on here, as there is in any survey. But actually, it's the second sample there that interests me. So we asked, how important is it to you that the vendors you purchase from support the long-term interests of the industry and consumers' access to vaping products? So are making noises that they're supporting consumers' interests in gaining products in the future. So where people are answering more honestly is in this second question, because you can see they're thinking about it. They're saying, it matters to me, but I just don't know which suppliers support the long-term interests of the consumers, and therefore not able to make purchases on this basis. So in other words, businesses looking to differentiate themselves in this particular market at this particular moment in history, one of the biggest opportunities for them is to demonstrate strongly that they are committed to ensuring that this cultural community will have access to its products going forwards. Just one more thing. We have another website we launched earlier this month. It's called vaping.com, and it's our sister site to ECF. The idea is that a lot of the content that kind of disappears in the annals of history on ECF can essentially be transferred onto more of a static resource for people to use. And we've just touched on some of the survey data today, but we're going to release, hopefully towards the end of this month, our full set of data for anybody to access. Thank you very much.